Hello, everyone. I am so excited to have my bestie Catherine live here with me today. Thanks so much for
Oh,
being here, Catherine.
so excited. I really am.
Yeah, so we're talking about witches today. This is the witch conversation. And we're going to be talking about all different aspects of them, talking about like the archetypes, the identity, the history, like what all these things have led to in our modern identity or view of witches, so that we can really bring together back also that wholesome and feminine creatorship. Because as we go into this, you'll see as we go into the history, as we talk about it, I think it's left a mark, it's left a wound in us, morphogenetically, energetically, culturally, and bringing to a light and illuminating some of these pieces that actually did happen, as well as how we're working with them today, I think is really going to empower us as women. And I always encourage men to listen into these conversations so that we can just understand each other even more. So that's what we're getting into today.
It's going to be really rich. I think that I'm just looking at what's ahead of us in this conversation, and it's a really rich, unique conversation on witches, one that I haven't really heard being had much. So I think it's really exciting.
Absolutely. And it's been really up. I mean, it's up seasonally, right? As we approach Samhain, of course, that energy always, it really comes up. But it's been up in my close friendships with the women around me where there's been big movement happening around this topic that is a new wave of it that I haven't seen before, of really needing to look at, address, honor the witch wound, whether that's like from another life or like what we're archetypally exploring or historically. It's really up. And so I'm excited to take this approach with Catherine because it's funny. We're going to get into it in just a second, but like I see you as witchy. And then you said, as we're navigating this, that you don't even necessarily identify with the word witch, which was so interesting to me.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that assume I am very identified with that archetype of the witch. And it's just interesting, right? I've even had people who introduce me and say like, and she's so witchy. And it's always just sort of like, I've never said that. Like I've never proclaimed it and been like, yeah, I'm a witch. But there is this, I think when we don't know how to categorize someone, this is now in the arena of like, she's like this, she's like a witch. And so it'll be fun to break that, that'll be fun to kind of dissect that a little bit and get into like, what is that? I just find it very curious. Yeah, because it's not something I've ever personally like really identified with.
Yeah. And that's something that I'm personally very excited to dispel in this conversation, because just like a little foreshadowing, we pigeonhole ourselves into these boxes because we think those are the only ones that we have, and it might
Yeah.
not be as holistically honoring and descriptive of who we are and where we're at. And I've found myself in that over this lifetime as a big theme. So with that, let's dive in. Let's get in here. And I want to start by asking you your definition of witch. How do you define witch, or how do you see that defined?
So I know a lot of women who very proudly carry that kind of banner of like, I am a witch. This is what I do. This is my lifestyle. And definitely a common thread with those women who are alive and like offering those like services and really embodying this. I see them as offering definitely an identity for women to wrap themselves in, because they have felt that lack of like, I don't know where I fit.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that a modern witch is really helping women with like it's a pretty broad term. I mean, there's herbalism, there's even just the way that we go about life and preparing food, or um, going to sacred sites around the world and having ceremony, and just actively well, activating a lot of memory around the feminine. So I do think that there is quite a lot of that that's happening with like modern witches, but it does have this thread of independence and rebellion, and I don't need a system to support me. I'm creating my own world of support and rules. And of course, typically it's really earth based and it's really elemental based. But I do really sense this, yeah, just this like fierce independence
Yeah.
with someone who's really claiming that title of witch. And yeah, so and then it's really interesting as we get into the history of witches, that does not seem to carry over for me. When I really think about like the witch trials and things, that I've started to really tune in with that. And I don't know, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I don't know if women were really carrying a banner of like, I am this, whatever the word is, if it's witch or if it is, even something else at the time of like, I belong to this order
Mm-hmm.
of this way of being.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that was as prominent, like specifically during the witch trials, which is actually quite jarring to me and really interesting and like terrifying, actually.
Yes.
So, um, yeah. So, I mean, those are some, and I read tarot, and I love to play in divination, right? And that's all very tied in with witch. And even just the way that I think that I look and carry myself, it has like a little bit of that witchy like archetype, I think.
Yes.
But it's not something that I personally like to just say this is all of who I am.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I love that. Thank you for sharing those nuances that you're seeing and in yourself. I would say for me, well, as I have been studying this, because we got onto this podcast by the BBC called Witch, and it was surprisingly exceptional because
Yeah.
it's more of a mainstream, depiction and storytelling, but it was very, very good. And there's an author in that was interviewed named Ronald Hutton, and he does the history of witches. And so he talks about the different definitions, and some of the main ideas to his definitions is that there is the historical witch and there's the modern witch. And the historical witch is someone who had supernatural powers that caused harm. That was like kind of the main theme of like what a witch was like in that time. And today, as you were just saying, one of the main highlights is this super empowerment and super independence as the feminine, which is like a very different definition. Is like an empowering thing,
Mhm.
in the modern sense. And so I find that so interesting that it's so different. And I think understanding, yeah, this history as we go into it is going to help us maybe redefine ourselves and be more inclusive as we explore. And one of the things that you and I have been going back and forth about before this conversation is the intersection between what is a woman and what is a witch, right? Because a witch is an aspect of woman, and especially in the historical sense that's been distorted, that's been pushed into the shadow. And so before we go forward into the history, I also want to like bring forward the exploration, just like the definition of what is a woman, so that we can put these things together how feels, most aligned to us.
Okay. I just think all women are so deeply magical. And I think that this witch word and other words too, like for a long time, I grabbed onto the word priestess, and that was really good for me. Like I really liked that. But this one, it does give, has this permission giving quality to kind of just unravel into magic,
Yeah.
right? But but women are just so inherently magical, like without effort. It is a quality of woman that is just there. It just is. And I think that it always will be for those of us who are just like fully embracing our humanity, or taking care of a family. Like there's all of these incredibly mundane things that we do, but there's love and magic infused into it. And so it reverberates with this like special quality. And that's just so inherent to being a woman. However, the time that we live in, and just like that's been forgotten so much,
Mm.
that I think we're so hungry for, like, if I give myself this title, or if I grab onto this, it will help me deepen into my magic, into my inherent, my already, the gifts that are already here. Like it's like this,
Permission.
even, yeah, that permission. And even doing that in itself is like her using her magic, right? Of
Mhm.
like casting this new identity of, I'm stepping into more of myself.
Yeah.
And so, I just, it really brought, this conversation brought up for me, like, what is the highest expression of our feminine energy? What's the highest expression of being a woman? And of course, being magical and being intentional and working with the earth, and a lot of these things that I think we associate with being a witch. It's just that's who we are as women.
Yeah.
Um, when we are allowed to just almost like live in our natural state, and live in our highest form of expression, there's so much magic that unfolds there. Um, so pretty much without efforting.
Yeah. I love that. So it's the innate mystical like aspect of us that's just like our nature is that. So when it's like
Yeah.
these historical supernatural women, it's like, yep. I mean,
Yeah.
we conceive and birth babies through our bodies, right? And
Yeah.
as I tuned into the definition and what I've been learning with some tribal elders that I'm with in connection, they talk about women being those who can create and continue life, like those that
Mm.
create it and create the continuity, because it has to then perpetuate itself. And to create continuity means that continue pouring in of nurturance or of whatever is needed, right, for the continuity of life. And that is really beautiful and helpful and powerful. And I think that that's where maybe things got a little bit scary, where it's like, dang, like when a woman uses her power, and she can use it in many different ways, but when she utilizes this power of creation for life, for family, for like nature, I mean, it's very powerful. And I can see where from a distorted lens, or that didn't understand, that could be quite scary. And in modern times, it is scary for some biological women to continue being women. Like that's how, there's a lot there, and there's a lot that we don't know how to navigate and work with, like how to harness and how to temper these different aspects of this very volatile and also flowing nature.
Yeah, absolutely. Because with this ability to create, there's also this incredible ability to destroy too. Like, like
Yeah,
we can do
yeah,
both. Like we are incredible at, and this is where I'm excited to talk about ritual and magic. That's a lot of like, there's a lot that we can create there, and there's a lot that we can deconstruct, and a lot in like burn down intentionally, safely, with love. But like that no longer comes with the continuation of nourishing, right?
right.
I think that's a huge conversation with mothers right now, as we are in such a time of needing to consciously decide what comes with, what do we pass down, and what do we intentionally not,
Mm,
what stops here. And and I think that that's going to, continue over generations, of course, but it's like, it's really up right now. It's really up there's a dialogue happening
Yeah.
around that. And it's so powerful to do and to embody and to consciously interact with. So yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that forward because it's a very tight delineation between we are creators and destroyers, as you just said, and that delineation of destroying for the sake of harm or destroying actually for the sake of the preservation of life, right? Where you like
Yes.
light an actual contained forest fire to do a
Mm,
controlled burn so that then actually more life, more fruit, more fertility can come to that land space. And so I love that orientation of how we can use that force and
mhm.
that magic within us again for good, because if we're looking at
Yeah.
that old definition of those that created harm, it's like,
Yeah.
okay,
It gets
well then how do we
threatening.
learn from that, right?
Totally. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, this is exciting. All right. So let's move into the history. Because I think both this really diving into the history it was shocking for me
Mm, me too.
personally. And I would love to hear, what you learned, what were some takeaways, and how that was for you to explore that.
I mean, in a nutshell, when I started this witch podcast was incredible by the BBC. I highly recommend it. Like, it just brought about a like this war on women that was pretty inescapable. Like, there really, once you sort of were categorized as a witch, what could you do? I don't know if there was much other than maybe join a church, or probably have to give up so much of yourself and to stay alive. And so, gosh, I it was shocking because there was such an insanity around this, really. And I don't know collectively if we have, I haven't, and I'm like pretty spiritual and like in this space, and I hadn't even really sat with the witch trials and what we've been through as our history as women. And last night I was out to dinner with my husband, and I asked him, I was like, what do you think of this word witch? And he was like, oh, I don't, like, it had like he'd never thought about it, of course, he's just like, I don't know. And there was just this, like, I was like, this is so interesting, because I've been deep and thought about this for like a lot, like weeks, like
And
the
your husband's also like very keyed in. So
oh,
it's even
totally.
more fascinating.
Yeah. And he's like married to me. And I'm like, yeah. So, I mean, it just was so like, wow, this is so something that has been, so not only the history of women and what happened to women, but this current grief that I feel around how there's so many of us that don't know, myself included. There's still
Mhm.
so much that I don't know
Mhm.
and that I question around just, yeah, around it. So um I was just really shocked at the accusations that were happening towards women for doing things that had so much innocence
Mm.
um
Like what, for
woven,
instance?
like helping a woman give birth, right? Like being a
Right.
midwife, or being maybe suggesting some plants that could help with something going on in her life, right? Like knowing herbalism, or just I don't know, it really made me wonder if there were just, whatever political dynamics that were happening at the time, if a leader in the community had a riff with someone else, one of the ways that, this whole witch thing was weaponized was just like, well, your daughter's a witch,
Yeah.
and just hurting each other for these like nonsensical reasons. So these are all, thoughts I've been sort of wrestling with recently. I think before diving into this, I assumed there was a group of women who said, we are witches. We do
Right.
that. We're the witches. Come and get, not come and get us, but like, I'm proud to be a witch.
Right.
And I don't think that was happening as much as I thought that it was. I don't think there was a banner being carried by women protesting. I think there was a lot of uh, just innocent people and women
Mhm.
who found themselves maybe not agreeing with a rule or a religion, or taking away from, the profession of men giving birth, or whatever it was, and being a threat. So I don't know, there's a lot of this history that's still unfolding with me that I'm still exploring, but it was shocking, I think, to actually begin the journey of understanding what's been going on.
Yeah, I completely agree. And yeah, thank you for feeling into the immensity of that, because I think that that's the piece, that sometimes like the modern witch banner can actually bypass the very wound that is there, where we're just like taking up that flag and carrying it on, and we're like, what is that
Yeah,
identity? What is that flag that we're even carrying? Um,
yeah.
and as you were saying that, I was watching this YouTube video of a pie being made the way it would have been in like the
Oh,
1700s, like
yeah,
a historical rendition of how a pie was made. And what alternatives did they have, to like, I need to go pick some herbs out in the forest. Like, this is just what we do. Like, this is where we
practical.
go. Like, this, or she's giving birth. I'm going to sit there with my sister, or like, this old lady knows what's going on. She's done this a bunch, right? So it's not, there weren't many alternatives. And the fact that most of them were just women. They were just women, like not doing anything crazy. I mean,
Right.
some, outliers might have been doing more extreme things, but that was outliers.
Sure.
Um, but what was shocking for me was those German towns that were mentioned, where some of the German witch trials led to almost complete extermination of any woman left in the village.
Yeah.
And when I like heard that, it's like, this is a deliberate. This isn't just like a seeking out of certain women. This is like an overarching attack on women.
Yeah.
And most of it is, just for context that don't know, most of it was instigated by the church and perpetuated by that, good, bad, evil, sin thing. And it was that inherent women are evil energy that is pretty triggering, still for me in this life. So that was just pretty wild.
Yeah, I mean, can you even imagine like being like just trying to uphold whatever those standards were? Like it must have just been impossible, or felt just impossible,
Yeah.
and terrifying, like
Terrifying.
absolutely terrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just it's really horrific. It's really so it is interesting right now to so that's what a witch was. That's what the witch trials, that's what it was about. It was this attack on women, and it does feel a little like yeah, it's interesting to bring that title over today, like you said, without the what is it that we're carrying on, what are we moving forward with that title. So it's interesting.
Yeah. And what honors those women and
Yeah.
what they went through.
Mhm.
And it's something that I think bleeds through more. I mean, anyone listening to this, I think, will feel the true gravity of it, but it bleeds through more than we think. And I'm going to speak to my friend's experience. I won't say her name, but she'll probably listen to this. And when I was in Europe this summer, one of my close friends that was on the retreat and went to both of my retreats, she did a weekend in Edinburgh in Scotland. And she was like, I don't even know why I'm going there. And she just went there for the weekend. She could have gone to Ireland, she could have gone anywhere else, and she went there. And she's young, and she had like a full past life resurgence of the witch trials, and the synchronicities and the way that it physically manifested in her was undeniable. And I've had so many of those experiences in this life, and witch related. actually I couldn't even speak. I couldn't even use my throat and use my own magic in this life until I reckoned with that lifetime. And at that time, I didn't even believe in past lives. But anyways, it just came up for my friend, and she just had to like be with the grief of it. And so I personally also don't see any type of lifetime that is more impactful for those that are born biologically female than witch lifetimes. That's just so impactful and carries through and bleeds through those timelines more than anything else today I've seen. And we haven't even talked about say what it ancestrally does to us as we move forward into who we are as women. So yeah, I think just breathing into the reality of how big of a thing it is and was.
Yeah, absolutely. And it wasn't that it was just her, she wasn't just experiencing, I would imagine, her own trauma, but the trauma of her community as
Yeah, all
well.
of it.
It was like it was this like you just were watching it unfold with everyone that you loved. Yeah, it's this unimaginable thing.
Yeah. And in that case, with that witch trial, it was a king that thought he was cursed by this one witch. And so he just took it out on, like thousands of women. And
Yeah.
so it's this deep projection. And that creates this deep freeze, in us as I would say as a gender and morphogenetically, culturally. Um, so there's a lot there.
Yeah.
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 So, um, so moving into a new direction, because part of what Catherine and I wanted to keep was this illumination alive of then, well, what is magic and like what is ritual and how can we honor our own creatorship as the feminine. So I wanted to talk about ritual, so how we can carry, like you just said at the beginning of this talk, our natural innate magic and mystical natures with us into life in an empowering way that helps everyone around us.
Yeah, this morning I was really thinking about ritual and this question. And for me, I feel such a connection to my inner child with ritual. There
Mm,
is such a deep, and and having children and watching them play outside, they naturally have their own little magical rituals that they come up with just in their imagination. And so I think that it is such an innocent part of who we are and helps us to transform and to like move through transformation. And for me, it's not so much this thing that is comes from this like, well, it can, but like it's not so much this like elder witch who holds the spell book of knowing the rituals that will, whatever your wish is granted. It's not so much that. It's really just this innocence within us trying to navigate, how do we transform this? How do we move through this? And so for myself, I went through an intense period in my 20s of just, I had so many rituals. I'd come up with these not I just really really ornate, really detailed rituals for myself because I was going through such a transformational time. And I had been working in this corporate setting like 60 hours a week for so many years. And I once I cut that off, I think my inner child was just like, I need to play, I need to express, I need to give myself a framework for transformation that I believe in.
mm,
And so I really think that, the definition for me with a ritual is, or a ceremony, it creates like a doorway or a framework for you to walk through where things are different on the other side. And there's so much intention and, magic and weaving and sort of creating that archway or that door frame that is is the structure that you then consciously step through. So
mm,
that can be done in all sorts of ways. But I think that that's the intention, is to consciously walk through a moment to where you are new and you have a new perspective, or you have a new confidence, or whatever it is. You have a feeling of comfort that everything's going to be okay. And so to me, it just was such a such an inner child expression that needed to come out, or even like an inner teenager expression that needed to come out and really express. So yeah, I think that there's a ton. I mean, there's just so much power in ritual. And then there's so much power when you get together with your friends and you guys witness one another in a ritual. That's like, that's really powerful. So when we are seen in that transformation. So yeah, that's a bit on like on ritual for me. What about you? What's your definition, or how do you interact with ritual at this point?
Well, I love everything you just shared, and I think I got it on another level. You definitely are a muse for me in that way, particularly in this realm of ritual and of writing and like spell work, which we have a whole other episode on. So go into the
Yeah.
links below and listen to our episode on that, which is so great and a part of this ritual conversation. Um, I haven't been keeping up with it as much as I usually do, but I really liked the way that we were doing it together when we were together in person. Some rituals that we did fully came to pass, like
Yeah.
wild things that we just never thought would happen. And all of us in that ritual are living them today, which
Mm-hmm.
is pretty
Yeah,
powerful, like very
it is.
powerful miracle
Yeah.
type things. Deep nature immersion, I think, would be the primary. And then I think I also relentlessly pursue resolution. So I'll like just wormhole my way through to the core root of something, and I am like relentless at figuring out what that is and whatever needs to change to get to that place. And then once I find out what that is, I feel like a big transformation. So it doesn't
Yeah.
look, I don't think, like the more like aesthetic, like beautiful romantic ways of transforming. But that's how I just have learned to use ritual for myself.
Nice.
Yeah,
I
I've
like
never
that.
even thought about that. So thanks for
Yeah.
asking me. I was
Yeah.
probably a little messy in that, but
But so relatable. Like
okay.
so relatable, because
Thanks.
yeah, there isn't, I think there is a bit of an outlier to me where it's like I like the ornate rituals. Like
Yeah.
I like to dress it up. I like to really dress it up. I like to bring in all, the, the herbs, the candles, like make it like set the table. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
I love it that way. But we all have our own unique way of doing this.
Yeah. Well, and I
Yeah.
think that it is very important, and it's served me a lot to bring in the elemental and the physicality of ritual,
Mhm.
because so much of just it was more just a formed way of how I transformed and moved through energy, but so much of it stayed like in the ethers, in the mind, in the energy, that it was a lot harder to move through. And so
Yeah.
anchoring through the physical objects and the elements and like writing or whatever it is has been much smoother for
Yes.
me.
That's a key piece. I'm so glad you spoke to that, because I think that was implied to what I was saying, but it is so much about bring it here, see
Yeah.
it here.
Yeah.
Like it's here. It's in, like you can hold it, you can touch it. There's a tactileness to it. And that is like really profound. Yeah. Oh, I love that part.
Yeah. Thank you. I guess how I do it, the one thing that came to mind is through moon time. I think my bleed is a very significant time, and using my blood as I offer it, like to the trees, to the nature, as like a definitive destruction and a definitive creation of what I want.
Yes,
So I would say that that is my most consistent and powerful, like physicalized ritual.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks for your inquiry. I love that.
Hmm.
um, before we move on to kind of this, how the witch thing has moved into like our own psychology and definitions, I want to talk about magic as magic and ritual as the energy of bestowing blessing and prayer. Because
Hmm.
again, the counter is the black magic, or where we're misusing our power. And you're so beautiful at utilizing power and creation for goodness. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, I've never even considered that it would be used in any other way. It would be like that is a really terrifying thought to me
Yeah.
actually, because like the repercussions of that would just be so like significant to do that. Like, like
Yeah.
how would it just be like, I mean, just on a human like selfish level, like that would just be such a terrible idea. And so like
Such a terrible.
I, you know,
Yeah.
um yeah, so I can't quite even like imagine wanting to harness that power for like in a harmful way, because there's so much that we can then just like create in the highest light for ourselves. There's just um yeah, so I love using writing for this. I love using my imagination for this and tapping into prayer, like writing out prayers. That is, yeah, it's really part of my process, I think, is getting my intention out. And then from there, I might have an inspired thought of like how to solidify it or how to remember this thought. That's a big part of ritual for me as well, as like different rituals that I've had, the way that I've uh, played them out. I think it was just more so that I remember it happened. I remember that I saw this version of myself, or I saw this version of a future that I really was praying for. And so the ritual brings about like a conscious memory that it's going to happen now, because we've gone through these steps or these intentions, to
Yeah.
tie myself more firmly to that outcome. And so yeah, and it's just a very inherent thing, and I think so many of us have this. I just want that to be so, like, I just think it's so part of our innocence, is wanting and praying for the goodness for all of us, like the highest good for all.
Yeah.
It just feels to me like it is just a very natural part of being a person, and being a woman is just our um yeah, just natural tendency towards that.
Hmm.
And yeah, I just really believe that that's how it is.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Um, I I find so I want to move into the next section as I respond to this, which is we're talking about blessing and prayer, right? And like how that's just like this innate natural thing. And then sometimes that feels polarized or opposite of then witch with like ritual. And I want to talk about this because this has come up as we've explored um, these deeper parts of us and these shadow aspects or these boxing in of these aspects of our consciousness as we identify with these different things, where it's like, no, blessing and prayer is in the religious spiritual category, and then
Okay.
witch is in the
Yeah.
ritual, maybe more dark category. And
Yeah.
it's like, no, freaking no, we're done with
Mhm.
that. Like, it
Yeah.
is time to stitch all these things together, and we can be all of them all at once. And so I would love for you to talk about that, and maybe we can start with because as Katherine and I were exploring, we realized that these things are really coping mechanisms unconsciously playing out from the
Yeah.
history ancestrally, morphogenetically, where it's like, like we kind of need to go into these little plane of these parts, and we can be done with that now. So with the witch, do you want to speak a little bit to darkness, rebellion, control versus creation, and like the shadow, kind of
Yeah,
talking about like the shadow and how it can be like illuminated?
sure. I think for myself, the way that I was raised, and there was such a in such a conservative environment, right? Like really conservative, really Christian, very uh rewarding, like rewarding to the good girl, rewarding to that archetype, right? And I think it's very natural when you can't like get out of that for so long, you just sort of like burst out at one point, and there is this rebellious thing. You can kind of see that in like kind of a classic journey of like a teenager who's just trying to find themselves in different expressions, right? And they go through a goth phase, or they go, like just needing to like do the polar opposite thing of what was allowed,
Yeah.
right? Or like socially acceptable or rewarded. And so it's totally understandable. I've definitely gone through my own phase of like of like a grittiness, and just that's there. But it's just so temporary in my experience,
Yeah.
right? Like I think it's just such a temporary phase, and it's such a temporary coping mechanism for really just like we're all on this path of like truly just trying to find wholesomeness and trying to be like all of who we are, and feel complete and whole with just how we are. And so I've just found that phase, that real darkness, to be so in hindsight quick. Maybe when you're in it, it doesn't feel so much that way, but I think that that's such a temporary expression,
Mm-hmm.
at least in my experience. And when I see people sort of go through that, it can, I don't know, I think that it's best served as a quick exploration and
Yeah.
not something to stay put in. And yeah, because I don't want to shame it. I also don't, I think it's important, if you need to explore that, if you need
Yeah.
to, if there's something there that you need to go into it, fully go into it. But like, come, then take a breath, and reevaluate, and take a look at your bigger picture, and your heart. And so I've just always seen that to be a real temporary thing. And I think that people hold on to it as a fear, because there is this unpredictability to a woman exploring her darkness. There's a real unstable, like it's not a stable place, really. It's a pretty chaotic
Yeah.
environment.
Yeah.
Just in my experience, like there's quite a lot of chaos that can come up in that woman's world. And so there's this just like, whoa, she, kind of just, ooh, let's be careful there, because it's chaos, it's darkness, it's and not at all predictable. So yeah, I think it's an important element, but it's one to go in and then come out.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And part of what I'm wanting to tidy and clean is within the definition of witch. It's like, oh, someone needs to play out that rebellion, then you're pushed into that category, and then it almost taints witch. And like witch, as we're talking about, is so dynamic and so
Yeah.
tender, and I just want more for it, and more for everyone that is in that realm too. So yeah, there's something around that. And I experienced that as well growing up, because I was raised in a very conservative environment too. But it was pretty clear quickly that I was bad, that I was a sinner, because I wasn't a part of the religion. And I was, the 1% that wasn't. And so there wasn't anywhere for me to go. because it was either you're good or you're bad, and you're like pure or not. And I'm like, I
Right.
guess I'm not, because literally my grandma is saying that to me.
Yeah.
And
Right.
so I was just pushed into this other energy. And I played that out far longer than I would have liked to. I mean, I was so tame. I mean, but just energetically inside of me. It didn't really manifest outside in some dramatic way, but inside of me there was this angst of not being able to be at home in myself and to
Yeah.
include all of myself. And then the other part of that, which to kind of bring in another element beyond the polarity, is the belonging, is that inclusivity, where to identify means that we get to belong to whatever that, group is, to whatever that culture is. And right now, more than ever, I think people are moving into boxes so that they can belong to something, to
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah.
And I know how that feels. I want to hear how that feels to you, but I know how it feels to not belong deeply. And I was a 5-year-old that didn't feel like I belonged at all to anyone, like, or anything. And so I understand that pull and that yearning. Uh, and it is a birthright inherent that we already do belong. And so finding where we do belong, but in a more inclusive way of all of us, I think, at least for me, has been so helpful to not be just shoeboxed into a certain
Yeah.
energy.
Oh gosh. Yes. I mean, I think this is one of the greatest gifts of honestly of just like becoming older is that this um angst that you were speaking of to belong, it becomes cleared out. So especially if you're a younger person listening, I just want like because that is such an intense feeling. It's such an intense longing.
Yeah.
It can really take over like your life to
Yeah.
belong. And I empathize so much with what you're speaking to because that drive is so instinctual. It's
Yeah.
just like primal for us to want to belong and to be in community and to be accepted. One of the ways that I played with this a lot in my life was through this idea of submission. So
Mm.
like through the idea of like, oh, okay, so the bad girl thing, like, oops, that doesn't quite work. So I'll kind of go back to the other way. Maybe there was something to that good girl thing. I'll try that. Right. And it was like this dramatic swinging of me trying something over here. It didn't quite work. So I'd swing to this other polarity of that good girl, right?
Yeah.
Who is just like doing all of these like impossible to meet standards, right? It's just like kind of an insane like expectations that I think that good girl can put on herself going down that route. And what I was really feeling into before this conversation is being fully in that submission was not truly feminine. It's like this way of dealing with this such intense oppression of being just being a woman, like just being a woman.
Yeah.
There's I personally sense there is still a lot of misunderstanding and fear around just womanhood, like
Yeah.
just womanhood. There's still a lot that we're uncovering and accepting about it, about the complexities of it, because we have this history that we're bringing up that's just it's been ongoing for such a long time, and we're all coping to the best of our ability. But yeah, so is that I feel like I maybe
Yeah.
went into a
No,
different
that's
direction, but
exactly.
that
Oh,
okay.
you're swinging
Okay.
exactly where we want to go.
Okay,
Um,
perfect.
yeah, and there's something to realize, the women that came before, the ones that didn't die in the witch trials, and right now we're speaking from like the Western Eurocentric perspective of those that experienced that. But in many cultures around the world, there have been witch trials. There has been this
Yeah.
persecution. So it's important to note that. But right now we're speaking from the European perspective. Is that okay? So those women died. well, then how did the women survive? Like, how did they
Yes.
cope? They must have
Yep.
had to be so different, or like so keyed in to exactly what could like set off and trigger the patriarchy or like the religious groups or this or that. So that coping mechanism to freeze, to numb, to fawn, to submit for literally your life became something very strong in the morphogenetics of the women that survived, aka us, the descendants,
Yeah.
that's in there. So there's this individual experience, of course, of this swinging to these different identities and these different things that can help us belong and feel good or whatnot for a time. But then there's this deeper play out that's cultural, that's morphogenetic, that's ancestral, that is deep. Um,
Yeah.
and I can speak from that because I come from at least 7 generations of deep submission and suppression. And what it does is it definitely limits us entirely from the true vast nature of what you were saying is inherently feminine, of that is magical, that is mystical. And so moving out of that is big. And for me,
Yes.
at least, moving into how I've gotten out of the submission energy is by moving into receiving and surrender.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the energies that have really helped me move through that.
Yes. Yeah, because it's like vulnerability is still so key and so
Yes.
important, right? Like vulnerability is not the same as submission. It's not that, it's not the same thing at all. So that softness and that vulnerability and like yeah, just really being so open, so like
Yeah.
ooh, like tenderly open
Yeah.
is beautiful.
Yeah.
But yes, I just completely I really love everything that you were just speaking to. And it's like it brings me back to that conversation that was like, so what do we go forward with? Like how, and that's a huge part of, I know what you are really unraveling within yourself right now is just, okay, what are the pieces that I pass on and what is stopping with you? And that's a
Yes.
huge one.
Yeah.
It's huge.
Oh yeah. I mean, and that's the destruction that you were talking about. And
Yeah.
like the of like this will not continue past me. There's just no
Yeah.
freaking way in the world. I can't
Right.
do everything because this stuff is a lot, and it's really important
Yeah.
to realize that we can't take on the world and the whole thing ourselves, and there will be things that's left over, um,
Mhm.
that maybe blind spots we couldn't see, or certain energies that need to do another layer, and it's going to take a couple generations. That took a lot for me to accept, because in myself I'm
Yeah.
like, no, nothing passes through. And it's
Yeah.
like, okay, that's too much pressure, and that actually forces something that also isn't natural in us, to put these like crazy expectations on ourselves as well.
Yeah. We're all doing like you're activating that.
Yes.
It's just there's so much that, the pieces that we decide to take on, there is that beautiful ripple effect too.
Yes.
So yeah, we're all taking on different pieces that do, I really believe, really weave together and help lighten the load for all of us.
Yeah, because we don't need to do it all ourselves, and that's part of the point,
Yeah.
right? And that's part of the belonging, is that we belong to this greater tribe of humanity, and trusting that certain people are doing their parts. Some people aren't, and that's actually catalyzing more energy
Mhm.
for those of us that want to transform, which is powerful
Yes.
as well.
Yeah.
So there's a lot there.
Yeah.
Before we stitch all of this together, because as you can see, what Catherine and I are intending, which is like we are which we are all of it. Like we are all of these aspects in this mystical dance of the feminine that is just very multifaceted, and that's the
Mhm.
way that it is, and it's beautiful, and like accepting and embracing all of that is really the key. But the last piece I wanted to talk about is ageism, and the hag elder phase that was highlighted in that podcast, and what came up for you around that?
I think that this is like really, really relevant to us right now and today. I don't know if it's more than ever. I don't know, but there's like part of me that's like, it's just like, it's more than ever. Like this is really, really up. Okay, where to start with this? Because yeah, I'm listening to this episode and I forget the percentage. Like I
I think
didn't
it was
make it.
50.
I think it was like 50% of the witch trials. It was like the women were over 30 or 35 or something.
Forty, I
Or
think he
maybe
said.
40.
Mhm.
It just seemed like there was this clear attack on the women who were older. And um, and that really struck a chord with me because I had just come out of some studying I was doing with a friend, and she really lays out this beautiful sort of astrological map of things that happen to women right around 40. And there's quite a few significant astrological events that, well, not just women, men as well. But through the lens for what happens for women, Pluto reaches 90 degrees from its natal position. So it reaches like a square position when we reach about 40. And that's a really powerful invitation into who are you really? And there's just this total shedding of the skin, truth telling, say it how it is sort of woman that emerges after that portal if you go through it consciously. And there's such an ability to speak the truth or speak what needs to kind of be said that no one else is going to say.
Yeah.
Because you've earned it, because you've you're the one that now can bear that gift to others. And I love that about older women. It's like this emanation of, I'm here to serve,
Yeah.
period. Like,
Yeah.
I don't have time for anything else. Like it's not fluffy. It's just what it is. And that is such a beautiful gift for us all to drink in, like regularly, like, having friends or having people in our life who have crossed that threshold, who can tell us like it is, or, kind of really
Yeah.
guide us and be that big sister, is just this immense gift. And then it just, so with that knowledge of, my perspective of what a hag or like an elder woman who's just like lived out her life consciously, totally makes sense that you wouldn't want them disrupting church service. You know what I'm saying? Like, you just don't, like, that's just really inconvenient for some really prominent ideas. And so my heart just ached for those communities that lose that essential piece to raising young girls into women.
Yeah.
It's just it's such an important element. And so, for myself, I've really been reflecting a lot on that. Just more excited than ever, honestly, because I certainly had a deep fear of getting older. I think that's really common among women, especially right now. Deep fear of aging, deep fear of like losing it, right? Like whatever that means to whatever that meant to me, whatever that might mean to who's listening. And there was just this deep sort of like gratitude that I felt for the qualities of becoming older, of just, having our wisdom more distilled and more potent. It's really important that we all do that work together of embracing becoming older together. I think that it's certainly up for me right now. It's certainly something that I'm thinking about really consciously right now as I go into the next decade of my life and the next the rest of my life.
Yeah.
But Yeah, I think there's a deeper honoring that I felt in hearing those statistics, how there was specifically such an attack on older women. It really touched me.
Thank you. And it makes a lot of sense that, like you said, it would be so um, shaking, so earth shattering to the people having these women around. Like if they were directly attacked, that means that there was something there. And
Yeah.
that has been one of my internal angst in this modern time, is not having those elders and like those truly initiated. And not that all of those women were in the past, but I would think that they would be to some degree. And like there's even more of a truth medicine because of like culturally, it went bad for them. But now we don't have that. And I think that that's one of the big things missing in our generation and younger, is like we need some elders to like be like, what are you doing with your life? Like, what are
Yeah.
and to like call us out.
Mhm.
And I feel like I've had to, no, I did. I like, there's been major call outs that I've seeked from like listening to Jordan Peterson, listening to some of his things called me out and changed the trajectory of my life. And so I think it's so needed. So thank you for speaking to that. And I agree with the like massive fear of ageism. Um, and I've definitely felt that as well. And I think I felt it to such a degree that I started in my early 30s being like, I need to like work through this now. While I still have youth, I'm going to start working through this. I do feel a massive difference, and I don't know what it is, but I think this can start weaving the conversation together. And because you're feeling it a bit too. So I don't know if it's something collectively happening, or if maybe it's my age. I'm not sure, but I'm seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, because when I looked, past 40 before, I was like, oh God, I don't even
Yeah,
know.
terrified.
Yeah, like
Yeah, just
what
like,
that
oh,
looks like at all. And there's been this deep, deep anchoring in me. Oh my God, I'm going to be
yeah.
living a long life. I'm
Mhm.
around for a long time. These are the certain contributions that I want to make.
Yeah.
These are the different skills that I want to develop and be able to pass on, and the beauty that I want to deliver to the world. During the eclipse, I was in a stained glass class, refining the edges of this glass flower piece, and I'm like, I want to create this for the world, for the community. I want to do these certain things and
Mhm.
also bring experience. And I've definitely been feeling that the past couple of years, where I'm like, oh my God, I have things to share and pass on because of experience. It's not a knowledge thing as much anymore. It's not me just having information, but I'm like, from experience, let me talk about relationships or whatever it is to younger girls. And I feel that value. I feel my own self-value really starting to grow. And this outside energy that almost feels like those wise women or those archetypal energies of the past, being like, this is what this the rest of your life can be like, this is what it's meant to be as woman. And that feels very empowering. And I think because of my vulnerable honesty with myself, of being like, I'm terrified, I don't know, and I'm open to the solution, I'm open to the resolution, and like, what is this for? And being in that asking has led to this moment of not, it's deeper than excitement, because it's like, ooh,
Yeah.
ooh, yes, okay,
Mhm.
this is intriguing. um
Yes.
that's coming forward. So I know you've been feeling that a little bit too. What do you think that's coming from?
I mean, the first, like from God, like I think there's just this, like, I think there is a higher, like you said, I do feel certain guides that it's interesting that I was told in my younger years, like, you're not going to work with them yet. Do not invoke them. Do not, that is for when you are an older woman. That is not for now.
Whoa, really?
Like,
You felt
yeah,
them
yeah.
like hanging out?
Yeah, well, specifically like that Morgana
Yeah.
archetype,
Oh, right,
right?
right,
And
right,
there was
right.
always that, like, I was always so drawn to these, like, yeah, to these archetypes of woman, right?
Yeah.
And then I had a reading that really was just like, no, you haven't earned it yet. Like, that's not yet,
Yeah.
not yet.
Yeah.
And it was like, because there is hours of practice to be put in now. And that can be hours of practice into, for me, it's like my Irish crochet skills, it's my knitting skills, it's like practical, it's cooking and
Yeah.
baking.
Yeah.
It's like, at this point I've put in like hundreds, and then like soon it will be thousands of hours into developing my skills. And that's, and then we can also speak to that, like you said, in relationships. Like, I've been, legally married to this man for almost 14 years. Like, we're going to be approaching like 20 years. That's like, I've got something to say to a
Yeah.
younger woman. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so there's this, like you said, it's this value that is like, it's so rich.
Yeah.
It's so rich. And it's a thing that can never be taken from me ever. And I think that's why it's so intriguing, because it can never be stolen from me. It is
Yeah.
mine, and
Yep.
I have claimed it. And so there is this, like, just like, man, that's yummy. Like, that's good. That's something that can come with, is how it feels to me.
Yeah.
And not even just come with, but then be passed down. Like, it
Yes.
lives on. And so that is a real antidote to the, like, oh my gosh, all my friends are getting Botox. What do I do?
Right.
Or like, do I look okay? Like, am I, like, just those angsts that come in right now, which yeah, it's just like, I have them. That's okay. We're gonna get through it, like, with grace, like, it's just, but it's like a weird time right now for women. I think, especially like in our 30s, it's like a really interesting, there's some interesting paths that you could choose right now.
Yeah.
And I feel particularly blessed to be in the generation that I'm in, because we've been able to do so much accelerated spiritual work in our 20s, and
Yes.
really arrive to a place that I think generations before us just didn't have the resources, just didn't have the ability to tune in to a podcast and get activated and, like, remember. And we've had so much of that. That's been such a beautiful thing to really help us accelerate our coming into this wholesome place of, yeah, just being really well exposed and educated to different perspectives that we can explore. So I just, I feel more hopeful now than I ever have. And I only assume that that will continue. Like, I think that that's going to continue. I think, especially because of my, just devotion to my skills, to building skills,
Yeah.
um, is, yeah, it's a huge part of my life right now.
Yeah. I think that that is a, a literal nugget of pre-hag wisdom right here, that cultivation piece. Because when you were talking, I was thinking about the maiden phase, and it's like, you're just given the maiden phase. You just being
Yeah.
alive is your,
Yes.
is your like gleaming beauty and like all this stuff. And how to enter into the eldership phase is connected to that cultivation piece, and is something that is built. It is something that is earned. It is something that is forged over time, and it isn't something that you can just like hold on to. Again, in my 20s, I was grateful to be in Los Angeles and to see these truly gorgeous women, in their 40s, in their 50s even, but they were clinging, I mean, clutching onto physical beauty as long as they possibly could.
Yeah.
And I noted to myself in that time, I said, I will not clutch onto this, because it
Mhm.
will go.
It
and
will.
and the physical beauty is a pre-death. Like, we have to face death and our mortality at some point, and the beauty goes before the physical death. And so it's a death of beauty to prepare us for physical death. And it's the external beauty, you know, and like this cultivation piece of not of skills, but as well as like experience and self-value and self-love is something that forges our internal beauty. And it's something that I'm still very much in the process of. But I just, yeah, appreciate you being on this journey with me, and particularly bringing in the skills piece, because that antidote, like you're talking about, where it's like, find a pursuit, you know, for the elder years that you can then contribute and to give back. And whatever that
Yes.
is, you know, if it is the herbalism, if it is the crafts, you know, if it is the cooking, and whatever it is, create something to give back. And in that creation process is how the valuation and the internal beauty is cultivated. It feels at this stage of the
It's
journey.
I think it's essential because I've spent a lot of time with my older relatives, like a lot of time, that don't have things to do other than
Yeah,
like watch television. Like they
right.
just didn't, like that wasn't part of their upbringing. It wasn't part of life. Um, and it's just when I was exposed to that, I was like, oh no, I want the basics of watercolors, the basics of acrylics. Like I'm taking a ceramics class. I'm like, yeah, my handwork skills
Yeah.
are have I don't want to, they've put me on a very different path. Like really spending my time cultivating those skills. It is such a simple piece of advice, but I can't even really explain how profound it's been for me to just keep me stable, keep me moving in the direction I want to be moving in. It's like it's my meditation, a way to keep the mind focused on something, you know, and not let my mind do, you know, do any weird mad scientist things with my life, and just keep, you know, like
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah,
So
it's the ritual.
yeah,
It's the
yeah,
anchoring into the physical, right? So it like brings it back to that you were talking about.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I hope that someone takes that away and says, yeah, okay, I'm gonna try this new skill. I'm gonna try something, you know, because it is very important.
Yes. And that repetitive movement, to be scientific, and the repetitive movement of women creates oxytocin.
Yeah,
So it
yeah.
keeps us in that healthy state. And then in an ideal world, we're doing it together. And then that fosters more oxytocin and like good hormones, and it creates everything good, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like you made something, which is also like incredible, you know?
Yeah, you're
Like that's
creating. And as the
yeah.
creatorship, you know, wanes in the fertility of like physical creation of a being, the same thing then
Mhm.
is carried on through the craft. So that creatorship continues on through time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well,
I'm glad we got to talk about
I know. Thank you. I know that we had some of these piece elements in here where we're like, oh, like should we talk about that? But I think that this has just been, I've learned a lot. I'm really excited. And
Yeah.
always so grateful for you and our friendship.
Oh, thanks, Bridget. I feel the same. I
Yeah.
really do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And please tell everyone where you are, what you're doing, what you got going on.
Okay, well, I am definitely here at home. And just, yeah, happy to offer one-on-one tarot readings through January, which is really exciting. So I'm just, yeah, really excited to share what I've learned in the archetypes that present themselves in the tarot to people, because it can be a very clarifying and very, very helpful to like move forward with some empowered energy when we can look at that, the map that tarot is, and where are you right now. It's a beautiful, beautiful art form. and one that can really open us up to storytelling, which is really, really important for us to weave together. So you can find me on YouTube. You can search Katherine Live, and I'm there on YouTube. And I'll leave Bridget a link so you guys can get on my newsletter as well, because I've been sending out lots of newsletters too. I would say
Yeah, your
those two
newsletters
places
are
are.
great.
Thank you. Yeah, those are the two places right now I'm putting in the most energy.
YouTube, newsletter, and
Better.
then the one-on-one awesome readings with
Yeah,
me.
and then
Very
like
great.
let's yeah, and I'm really excited because I've crafted it in a way where I think it's very approachable for anyone right now. I've got a $33 offering all the way up to like a deep dive hour together. So yeah, lots for everyone to choose from.
Awesome. Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Katherine.
Well, thanks, Bridget.
And
This was
thanks
fun.
everyone so much for being here and listening and going on this journey with us. It's just wonderful being on this
Mhm.
exploration with you. So thank you all so
Absolutely.
much.